Hey, how's it going, guys? T&D coming back at you. Season 19 marks the start of craftable weapons in Deep Stone Crypt, the Europa raid released back as part of the Beyond Light expansion. This raid has some really solid weapons and is personally one of my favorite raids to run in general. Whether you're a new player or someone who needs a quick refresher, I have just the guide to get you back in the swing of things to help you secure the crypt from the forces of darkness. Before we jump in, let's talk loadouts and team composition. This raid is very open-ended when it comes to classes and subclasses. However, you may want a Well of Radiance Warlock for the final Taniks encounter in order to give your team the best shot at getting that crispy one phase. On screen, you'll see my recommended loadouts for each encounter. For security and descent, I recommend running ad clear builds. On atraks, you want burst supers, and for Taniks, you want your most meta DPS loadout. Before we get into the main encounters though, you'll first need to pass through the Storm of Europa. Your team will first load into the patrol zone with a series of enemies in the area in front of you. Clearing these ads will open a latch that will allow you to enter the raid itself. Once through the hatch, hop on your Sparrow and continue to the first airlock. While in the storm area, you will notice these bubbles that protect you from the harsh European winds. Stay on your Sparrow and make your way towards the next protection bubble. Make sure to steer clear of the trip mines that can slow you up along the way. While in the storm, you will start to get a frost debuff, slowly counting its way to 10. You can guess exactly what happens when you get to 10. Standing in the bubbles lowers that counter. You can clear the enemies along the way if you want, but speedrunning past everything is perfectly okay as well. Visibility is not great out here, so try and follow the lights in the snow to help guide you if you get a little lost. The final jump is a little tight, I'm gonna be honest, so make sure to clear the gap and get rid of those pesky brigs as soon as you can. Once everyone's made it through to the final bubble, make sure to take this route here to reach the first secret chest in the raid, then hop back down and head into the airlock. This path will take you into the fabled birthplace of the Exos. Crypt Security is the first encounter of this raid, and it introduces several recurring mechanics that make up the core of this raid. The first being augmentation terminals, which are used in every single encounter. There are 3 buffs that players can hold to do various jobs involved, and augmentation terminals allow for these buffs to be passed from one player to another. You'll notice each encounter has multiple terminals spread across the map. The terminal you dunk into does not matter in any instance, so dunk in any and pick up in any. Let's talk about buffs, starting with the first 2 that are used in this encounter. Operator is a buff that allows you to shoot something other players can't shoot. In this case, you'll be shooting little terminal pads to open doors to start the damage phase. Scanner's job is to read things. The scanner can see things that no other players can see, and will need to relay that information to the rest of their team. With that info in mind, let's talk about how we can clear these tubes and make our way further into the crypt. There are 2 sides to the room, light side and dark side. There's also a basement area which can be accessed by shooting the pads near the back doors and heading down. Only one player can be downstairs at any given time. You'll need to divide the following jobs amongst your team: operator, dark scanner, light scanner, and backup operator. Split your team up 3 players to each side, with operators and scanners being split up as well. Picking up the operator buff from the terminal will start the encounter. Enemies will now start to flood the rooms. On the dark side, one enemy will immediately spawn with the scanner buff above their head. Kill that guy and have your scanner grab the buff. Now starts the read phase. In the basement, there are 10 panels that can be shot by the operator, 5 on each side. The scanner's job will be to look through the various glass panels in the floor on the main level to see which 2 of those 5 on each side are glowing, and relay that information to their teammates. Once dark scanner reads their 2 panels, they need to bank the scanner buff so the light scanner can read on their side. Important to note that there are also servitors that will periodically spawn in, which will deactivate all augmentation terminals until they are eliminated. I would highly recommend spawn killing these servitors to make this part go as smooth as possible. Each side will also get an overload champion, so make sure you have someone with overload mods on to take care of that. The operator should wait to go into the basement until dark side scanner does their read, as once you're downstairs, you're on the clock. Being downstairs too long will cause the room to light on fire, killing your operator, which is bad. Once both scanners have revved, the operator will shoot the 4 correct panels out of the 10 to start the damage phase. This is where you need to be fast and efficient. All 6 fuses upstairs will now be open, but will need to be shot in a specific order. Shooting the wrong fuse will result in a team wipe. How do you know which ones to shoot? Well, in the basement, there are 6 smaller fuses above the middle console pertaining to each one above. However, we need to get the scanner buff downstairs for the player to read them. Here's the order of operations. Operator banks their buff, backup operator grabs the buff upstairs, scanner dunks their buff, and then basement player grabs the scanner buff and reads the fuses. Once the fuse is destroyed, move on to the next one. Be wary of exploder shanks that spawn in to catch you napping while you're shooting away here. I would recommend xenophage, fusions, or shotguns to burst the fuses down as fast as possible. If your team is fast enough, you can one phase this, but if not, once the fuses close, have the basement player put scanner back in the terminal for dark scanner to read again. At this point, backup operator will go downstairs to shoot for the second phase. Rinse and repeat until the Crypt Security has been deactivated. Next up, we have Atraks, the Fallen Exo. You will be greeted by our boy Taniks for a second before he crawls on out of there. You'll be seeing him again in a minute. Let's talk loadouts. This boss fight is all about burst damage, as the girl's DPS window is tiny. Weapons like Parasite and Lament excel at hitting hard and fast, as do supers like Curus of the Falling Star Thunder Crash, Star Eater Scales Blade Barrage, and a good old-fashioned Nova Bomb. Looking around the room, you'll notice a couple things. One is the return of augmentation terminals on the left, right, and middle parts of the room, as well as these 4 escape pods in the back. These pods take you up to the space area of this encounter. This space room is laid out similarly as the basement area, with the main difference being the addition of 4 airlocks on the left and right. More on those in a sec. Split your team up into 2 teams of 3. You'll need an operator, a ground scanner, and a space scanner. Everyone will need big DPS, so make sure to bring your juice box with you. Space scanner and another player will immediately go upstairs, while the other 4 players stay downstairs clearing shanks and other enemies. Eventually, there will be 3 servers that spawn on the left, middle, and right sides. Kill these guys as fast as you can. This is also the point when the operator buff will spawn on a random enemy. Call this out to your operator player and have them pick up the buff and head upstairs. Once upstairs, the operator should shoot all 3 panels on the pods to send the pods back downstairs. By this time, 3 servitors should also be spawning upstairs as well, with one of the ads coming out with the scanner buff. Killing all 6 servitors starts the damage phase, so my teams usually keep the space right side servitor alive until both buffs are collected and everyone is ready for damage phase. DPS phase starts when you see Atraks replication on the bottom left. Each room has 4 bosses, and the scanner needs to call out quickly which one is glowing yellow. Hitting the wrong boss or taking too long is an instant wipe. Your team will need to count down 3, 2, 1 before hitting her to get the most out of your damage phase. Once the boss is gone, you'll need to find the nearest augmentation terminal to send the scanner buff downstairs. There will also be a little energy orb on the ground where the boss just was. Picking this up will give that player 40 seconds of Atraks replication. This buff can be shot off players' heads by the operator, and picking it back up resets the clock. But remember those airlocks I was talking about before? The operator can shoot those panels opening the doors, have the buff player go into the airlock, and then shoot it off their head, having the player leave before the door closes. This will vent the buff out into space. Letting the timer hit 0 will result in a team wipe, so make sure to keep an eye on it. Now, basement team will be doing the exact same thing space team just did. Have the scanner pick up, read the correct Atraks, then 3, 2, 1, go. Have one of the other 2 players pick up the orb from the ground and have them head upstairs to get it vented into space. Operator should be waiting up there to reset the buff as well as tell them which airlock to go to. Scanner will then back the buff into the augmentation terminal while space team does another DPS phase. There will be 4 phases total: space, ground, until everything resets, and you'll do another set of 6 servitors to clear once again. For final stand, you'll want all 6 players upstairs. There will now be 8 bosses strewn across the space room, so your scanner needs to be on their A game here. This can be a bit chaotic, but usually you won't need to do more than 1 or 2 bosses to clear that last little bit of HP. Once she's dead, grab your loot, and it's time to do a little spacewalk. Next up is this raid's jumping puzzle. I'd like to tell my teams to mute all comms for this part, as the music soundtrack of Deep Stone Lullaby paired with the muted noise of space are just too good and best experienced in a vacuum in my opinion. Also, there's a second secret chest along the path, so make sure to grab that for some extra loot. I'll let this whole puzzle play out so you can see the exact path, and I'll see you on the other side. third encounter sees us trying to stop Taniks from crashing the space station into Europa's surface. For this, we'll need 3 buffs to stall him out. For loadouts, you want your best ad-clearing weapons. Trinity Ghoul, Wither Horde, your preferred 900 SMG of choice. Hell, try some Warmind cells if you're feeling frisky. There will be Overload Captains once again, as well as some Void Shields, so something like Falling Guillotine is a beast in this encounter. The same 2 buffs make the return here once again, with ads spawning in with both, as well as a new buff called Suppressor. Divvy your team up with 2 players assigned to each job, so main scanner and backup scanner for example. This encounter is pretty repetitive. Once you hear the alarm sound, a few things will happen. One is you'll have 3 nuclear cores spawn in, which will need to be picked up and dunked in the center buckets in the middle of the room. The operator's job is incredibly simple here. Just shoot one of the glowing panels where one of the bombs is spawning to deactivate it. Now only 2 bombs will load in. Believe it or not, operator's job is done here. The scanner will now read which of the 2 buckets in the center of the room need to be dunked. They can come in any pattern, so make sure that whether you're using L2, L1 calls, or spawn boss calls, or hell, periodic table if you're feeling wild, just make sure everybody is on the same page. Also making sure cores are run and dunked in a timely manner. Players holding cores will slowly gain a stacking debuff of radiation, and I'll let you guess what happens when that guy reaches 10. Radiation goes down slowly over time, so make sure the same players aren't running every single round. Now the suppressor's job is to stun Taniks. Those buckets in the middle will not be active until Taniks is stunned, so suppressor kinda has to be on their game here. Stunning the boss is pretty straightforward. Around the room there are 3 floating beach balls. Just stand under each and shoot the boss, who should be glowing. It does not take much to pop the shield, so shoot under one side, then middle, and then the other side. I'll recommend your suppressor plant themselves on one of the side catwalks so that when each phase starts, they're already in position. Once both cores are dunked, one of your 3 buff holders will see their buff has been deactivated. They'll need to bank their buff in one of the augmentation terminals to hand it off to their backup player. You cannot dunk and pick up the same buff immediately, as there is a short cooldown preventing you from doing this. You will do this process of grabbing cores, stunning the boss, and dunking said cores 7 times, at which point a door in the center will open. Hustle down this hallway, ignoring the ads along the way, and get to the door before it closes. Also keep your head on a swivel for teammates doing some shady stuff with stasis or eager edge here, as they're way more dangerous than fallen enemies. Survive the impact with the planet's surface and prepare for Taniks' final form. The final boss of this raid is Taniks The Abomination. For this, you'll need your best raid DPS loadouts. That means 1 person on Divinity, 1 or 2 players on Well of Radiance, and everyone but the Div player on their favorite linear fusion rifle of choice. This encounter is very similar to the previous one. The map is split into 3 areas, which we'll call Spawn, Blue, and Orange. Each area will have 1 augmentation terminal as well as a bucket to dunk cores on the left and right sides. Split your team into 2 players to each area. Once the boss is out, you'll be clearing ads. Eventually, you will get a fallen captain, which will need to be killed, and will spawn in an ad that has 1 of the 3 buffs above their heads. Operator at spawn, scanner at blue, and suppressor at orange. The scanner buff will not be used in this encounter, so feel free to have anyone pick that up. The other 2 buffs are very important, however, so make sure to have 2 people who feel very comfortable with those jobs taking them on. Taniks will now float on over to one side and reveal 4 nuclear cores on his legs. These need to be team shot in a timely manner so all 4 can be picked up off the ground. At this time, you'll also start seeing purple rains spawn down from above. Make sure to jump out of those rings unless you got a death wish. Everyone not the operator or suppressor will now be running cores to dunk in the buckets. But which buckets, you might ask? Well, let's say Taniks goes to spawn. The 4 buckets that are now active are the 2 on blue and the 2 on orange. The 2 buckets near the boss are never active. Each of the 4 runners should be assigned a number from 1 to 4 to make things smooth here, with 1 being the first bucket clockwise from where the boss is, and 4 being the first bucket counterclockwise from where the boss is. These runs are going to be tight, so know where you're going before you pick up. Also make sure you're picking up your ball from the ground and not stealing it from another player by mistake. As the runners are going, 2 players will be detained at random. These bubbles need to be shot in a timely manner by the operator so the runner doesn't die from radiation. Suppressor's job is basically the same as the last encounter, with each of the 3 zones having a set of beach balls to stand under to shoot the boss. Once stunned, the buckets will become active, but 1 buff will also be deactivated. So suppressor will need to make sure both detains have happened already, because operator getting deactivated too early will result in you losing a res token and potentially a wipe. Once everyone is dunked, make sure to bank your deactivated buff and get ready for damage phase. Damage phase is pretty straightforward. The boss will head to the middle of the arena with 2 rings of trash flying around him. You'll need to stand in between these 2 rings in order to do damage. Look before you cross the road, as this trash is a 1-shot kill if it hits you. Plant your well and get divinity on him as soon as possible. The crit bubble will spawn underneath the boss himself, so you have no excuse not to hit all your shots. After a few seconds, he will boop you outside the rings, at which point jump back in and keep doing damage. You get 3 shots shots at DPS here, and honestly, this is a pretty easy one phase to hit. If by chance you don't one phase, just grab your buffs and have everyone clear ads back where they all started, then rinse and repeat until final stand. Final stand will have the boss teleport between the 3 zones with purple rain coming down from above, call out his location, and DPS him until he explodes. With that, you have completed Deep Stone Crypt. Congratulations and good luck on your Eyes of Tomorrow drop. Thanks a lot everyone for watching my raid guide. This is the first raid guide I've ever done, so leave a comment and let me know how I did. Would you like to see me do other refresh raid guides for older raids? I do have a community Discord server where me and my gang of nerds hang out and talk about movies, gaming, and generally all things nerd. You are more than welcome to come join us. Links are in the description below. Anyway, that's all from me for now, y'all. Happy hunting, Guardians.